Business of the Senate. Notice of motion number 2, standing in the name of Senator Roberts for a reference to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs References Committee regarding a COVID-19 Royal Commission.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the many different people who make up our One Queensland community, I move this motion and speak in favour. One Nation's motion, notice of motion, seeks to arrive at a fair terms of reference for a Royal Commission into the Commonwealth response to SARS-CoV-2. Those terms of reference could alternatively inform a Senate selecting committee of inquiry. COVID resulted in the largest health response in Australian history. I put this motion forward as an invitation to all senators in this place from all parties. Every single senator has heard from a stakeholder that the COVID response affected. This inquiry would ensure that none of those voices are missed by future terms of reference for a COVID Royal Commission. To be clear, the inquiry this motion seeks would not pass judgment on the COVID response. Its scope is simply to hear submissions from stakeholders to ensure that a future Royal Commission has properly informed terms of reference so that stakeholders will have an opportunity to have a say at such a commission. Death, injury and suffering have been caused not just from the virus and from our response to the virus. Only a Royal Commission will sort out how much harm the virus did and how much harm we did to ourselves. And there was a hell of a lot of harm. Firstly, this harm was caused through the use of politicised fear. COVID has taken an unknown number of lives during the 4 years the virus has been present in Australia. I say unknown because the number of people who actually died from COVID, as opposed to dying with COVID, is unknown. Knowingly increasing the death count to dial up the fear simply to ensure compliance with health directives appears to have been deliberate government policy at state and federal level. We treated people as though they were not human beings and rather treated them as a problem to be managed. Government did not manage the virus, government managed us. They controlled us, the people. An inquiry must go back and look at what we knew about the risk to human life at each stage of our response and compare that risk to the benefit achieved from the Commonwealth response to that risk. From that process, we can create rules to guide our response to the next such event. Fairer rules, rules that dignify and sanctify human life. The anguish we felt was not just fear of the virus, it was fear of the governments. The public never knew what the governments were going to do next, let alone why. There was no excuse for that. If we do actually have a handbook to be followed in a case like this, it's called the Australian Health Management Plan for Pandemic Influenza. This document was last updated in August 2019, just before COVID, and produced as a result of consultation with the states and territories. What happened to this? Let's see what's in it. Quote, the Australian Health Management Plan for Pandemic Influenza is the National Government Health Sector Pandemic Influenza Plan, which outlines the arrangements between the Australian Government and state and territory governments for the management of an influenza pandemic to support an integrated and coordinated response. End of quote. Seems to fit the bill exactly, I would have thought. In 2009, the Australian Health Management Plan for Pandemic Influenza was used to guide Australia's response to H1N1 swine flu. Next, I'll quote this from that document. The key factors in this plan's approach include the use of existing systems and governance mechanisms as the basis of the response. No national cabinet, no secret decisions in a new body with no rules or structure that use secret data the public still cannot see. I'm starting to see why the government put this in the bin. Quote again, incorporating an analysis of risks and benefits. End of quote. Oh wait, there it is, a risk-benefit analysis. What a marvellous idea. Quote, to support evidence-based decision-making. Evidence-based decision-making. Wouldn't that have been nice these last 4 years? We had this rule book in 2019, developed over many years of successes and failures, which clearly arrived at the right way to handle COVID. Why didn't we use it? Now, that is a question for a Royal Commission. Secondly, harm was created as a result of making decisions on the optics, not the data, in direct contravention of the government's own handbook. From page 11, under proportionate response, quote, In the past, all pandemic planning was aimed at responding to a worst-case scenario similar to the influenza pandemic of 1918-19. The 2009 pandemic showed clearly the need for the flexibility to scale the response to be proportionate to the risk associated with the current disease. Our response was supposed to be set to the actual harm that was occurring, not the fears around the worst-case scenario, which, as it turned out, never occurred. Around the middle of 2020, it should have been clear to our health officials and to this parliament, as it was to me, that scary videos of COVID deaths coming out of China were not representative of the strain of COVID active in Australia at the time, or for that matter, anywhere else in the world. Even worse, information came out at the time suggesting those videos were possibly faked, a suspicion confirmed in 2022 when some of the producers of the videos posted behind-the-scenes videos and photos of their work to social media. And yet this is what we set our response to, the fear, not the reality. No attempt appears to have been made to determine just how dangerous Australian COVID really was. That was another of many direct contraventions of the rule book. Instead, the government leveraged dodgy Chinese videos to ramp up the fear. When that didn't convince the public, the state started making their own fake propaganda videos portraying the worst-case scenario here in this country, something they had agreed not to do the year before. When people took to the streets to protest the measures being taken, the government responded with yet more fear. Then came the military and the police. We have all seen those videos of elderly Australians being tasered, shoved to the floor, knocked out, and a pregnant mother arrested in her own home for sharing information about a protest. We have seen protesters being shot with rubber bullets and hunted down in parks, and the Premier gloating. Each of these measures were designed to add to the fear and anguish to keep the population scared and compliant with measures that contradicted the government's own rule book. No wonder the government is exempting itself and the mainstream media from its own misinformation and disinformation bill. Using any measure, the COVID fear campaign would have been struck down under that legislation and the government left to argue their case based on data, as the government was required to do based on data, but they didn't. Thirdly, harm was caused economically, severe harm right across the country. The Commonwealth COVID response was the most expensive federal government line item since World War II. Taxpayers have been left with a bill in excess of $600 billion, a bill that keeps going up with every interest payment on the money we borrowed to pay for our response. Not all the money was borrowed, though. The Reserve Bank printed a large amount. Or, as the Reserve Bank prefers to say in answer to a question to me, it created money out of thin air using an electronic journal entry. That money printing is a direct cause of the inflation and cost of living crisis Australia now faces. Lives were destroyed as a result of our economic mismanagement during COVID. Businesses were closed. Personal wealth was taken from everyday Australians and handed to the predatory billionaires who were behind every COVID curtain. Worldwide, $4 trillion has been redistributed from everyday citizens to predatory billionaires, and this figure continues to rise. Fourth, marriages and families were destroyed. Children had stability, love and support taken away from them. Elderly were left alone to die. All the while, troops were on the streets enforcing lockdowns that were unprecedented in the history of our beautiful country, as part of an international American, British, Canadian, Australian COVID defence countermeasures consortium. A Royal Commission must determine if the cruelty was justified. An inquiry must look at the medical decisions taken. It would not be easy to peel back the layers of medical disinformation coming from university academics and research scientists that have a track record of saying whatever they are paid to say. There were so many alternatives to the pharmaceutical response our secretive National Cabinet decided upon. Why were these banned, ignored or ridiculed? What went on behind this veil of secrecy to pursue untested fake vaccines above all else? And the secrecy around Big Pharma's unproven antivirals like remdesivir, or as it's known after killing many people here and overseas, run death is near. Turning to the injections themselves, I don't call these injectables vaccines because they did not comply with the definition of vaccine in use before COVID. In the fact the definition of vaccine was changed to make room for these dangerous injections should have been a red flag to everyone. A vaccine is supposed to prevent you getting the disease and prevent transmitting the disease. It should provide long-term protection such that even if someone does get the virus, the body fights it straight off. None of that is true with the COVID injections. These fake vaccines do not protect people from getting COVID, do not prevent people from spreading COVID, they cripple immune systems, making people more susceptible to future infections, and any protection from severe symptoms is for such a short period of time, it's nothing more than a substandard treatment, a treatment that has caused more harm than good. This is not my opinion. It's among the findings of a landmark, published, peer-reviewed Cleveland study that found every dose of the COVID jabs administered to the sample of 50,000 health employees made them more likely to get COVID. A separate re-examination of the Pfizer Stage 2-3 clinical trial data that took 18 months, peer-reviewed and published as the Brighton collaboration, found that the Pfizer vaccine was associated with a 14% worse health outcome than in the unvaccinated control trial. If the TGA was doing its job, these injections should never have been approved. And the bad news about our medical response to COVID keeps coming. Only last month, a panel of international scientists revealed that COVID-19 mRNA injections are contaminated with plasmid DNA from the manufacturing process. This can cause inflammation of organs and it can cause cancer. Last week, I was sent a mainstream television piece which talked about turbo cancers being at record high levels. Medical researchers and doctors interviewed were apparently baffled about the cause. Let me help those researchers out. Here we have a substance that is contaminated with bacterial plasmids known to cause cancer, is full of spike proteins that are a whole class of medication and have not been studied for adverse health effects, not been studied, contain a substance called SV40 that directly inhibits our body's immune response to cancer. The injection studied in the clinical trials was not the same product that was used in Australia, and that have killed 14 people here and is suspected in 1,000 more, and doctors have reported 1,000 more. Deaths. Post-mortem data shows a direct link between the injections and turbo cancer, while at the same time Australia has had 30,000 excess deaths in the last year, directly correlated and traced under many scrutiny to the COVID injections. New turbo cancers are at record levels. Australians who have been in cancer remission for years have suddenly seen their cancer return. And despite the facts now coming out, doctors say they are baffled. The one person more than any other that must be referred to a Royal Commission is Dr. Baffled. Finally, One Nation does not accept that the quickie COVID cover-up that the Prime Minister announced is in any way fit for purpose. It's not. Asking these commissioners, 3 COVID insiders who championed our health response, to conduct an inquiry into themselves and their mates is a travesty of justice that has been roundly condemned right across the Senate. None of us know the guarantees Prime Minister Albanese gave pharmaceutical salesman and World Health Organization sugar daddy Bill Gates at their meeting in Admiralty House last year and early this year. Surely the need to cover up the evil committed in the name of health was discussed. Did Prime Minister Albanese agree to do just that? I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. If now is the time for the Prime Minister to call his COVID cover-up, then now must surely be the time for a Royal Commission. We can't ignore our sworn duty as the House of Review any longer. We have one flag, we are one community, we are one nation, and the whole nation wants answers, or we will never heal. And worse, may well go through all of this again. I ask the Senate to start the process today. Pass this motion and let's get the terms of reference sorted.